Good evening and welcome to the monthly mystical, all new and improved. Right, so we're on the ball. Hopefully everything's going to go very well this evening, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to slow down and take my time so I don't mess it up. So please bear with me. We have the amazing, and let me just change that. Before we start, please like and subscribe to the channel because it's going to help me and it's going to help everybody else. So I've got somebody at the door. Oh, okay. Apparently I've got to put my mic further away. There we go. Let me put my mic here. There's always a glitch. Okay, so we're in business. Right, so please like and subscribe to the channel. That would be amazing. And we are about to kick off. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Gary St Michael Nottingham to the stage. Right, let's go. Good evening. Let me put you on the big one. There we go. Yes, I can hear you well.
That's good.
Let me just... Seems okay. Let me just get rid of the background feed the ducks music. There we go. Right. Okie dokie.
That's all right. I was just checking the chat. All right.
Everything okay?
Yeah, no, it's all good.
All good at your end.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
I want to talk this evening about the Welsh Border, Wales, and the occult, and what has survived the archaeology of what people were doing, of which there's quite a bit, really. It's quite an interesting area. Part of the country that is not really widely known. And we're talking about the old Welsh counties of Montgomeryshire and Radnishire, which are now part of Palace, and on the English side, which is in Herefordshire. It's a part of the country that's not really either Welsh or English, right? And it's sort of a mix. The indigenous population is a mixture of both, really, in many ways. And what I want to talk about is the conjurors that were around these parts back in the 1800s. I want to look at their charms that they made, look at some of their occult texts that survived, and sort of have a general discussion about what they were up to. I mean, because it's quite an interesting subject in the sense that I could count 8 people who were in Victorian times what you consider to be hardcore occultists, working with grimoires up to their eyeballs, spirits and astrology and stuff. And to be honest with you, I'd be hard pushed to find a couple of 3 around here now. It's certainly changed in that sense. So what I want to talk to you first is one of the charms that have survived is what I call the Cascob charm. If we got a picture there somewhere, I think it was number 1. Some of these charms and things I sent over, I messed up the order, so you'll have to be patient while we sort a few things out. It's entirely down to me. It's a case of modern technology baffling an old fart, you know. It's a well-known syndrome. Have we got it? Oh, we lost sound now. That's the one.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me, folks? Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah. Good. Okay. This charm is rather quite important, and I'll tell you something of the story of it. I found 8 copies of this charm scattered around various parts of mid Wales. Most of them are in the archives at Aberystwyth, the National Library of Wales, although one or two are in local museums. Basically, you'll see in the bottom a wheel design, and you see some astrological symbols. The wheel, and generally it'll have the famous abracadabra charm on it as well. The wheel design is taken from Reginald Scott's Discoverie of Witchcraft, which of course came out about in Elizabethan times, which in itself is rather quite a story, because Reginald Scott, who was a squire from Kent, recorded the occult practices that he could find in Kent in his locality in an endeavour to rubbish the subject. But he put so much accurate information in what people were doing, they were buying the book, and it was reprinted 13 times. So in some sense, he sort of started a mass interest in the art, as it were. And so this material has obviously travelled all around the country, and it's ended up in mid Wales along the border here. Now, what happened was in 1820, Robert Cross Smith, who wrote under the name of Raphael, produced a magazine called Straggling Astrologer. And this charm was actually in there, and the details how to make it. So I suspect, although I can't say I know for definite, that a copy of this magazine found its way up onto the Welsh border here. Somebody started working with it. But as I say, I found 8 copies of this in the locality, and no doubt there's more out there. An acquaintance of mine who lives over at Llanidlas in mid Wales was given a copy of this charm by an old lady many years ago, and she said that her family used to make them. And when he knew I was interested in it, he said, come around and I'll show you. So I go around, and he couldn't find it. He was apologizing. He said, you're not going to believe this, he said, but this charm will only turn up when it wants to. He said, if I start looking where I left it last, it's never there. It has a life of its own, which is rather quite a bit of a bizarre thing. But eventually he did find it, and I did see it, and it was just the same as what we have here. The writing, of course, is a little faded a bit, but it was quite a cottage industry of somebody making this. So we could date this to at the earliest, really, 1820s. Because I say the information more than likely came out of Raphael's magazine, Straggling Astrologer. So that in itself, as I say, generated quite a little cottage industry around these parts. So one of the other things I'd come across, there was another charm, which I referred to as the Clun Broadwell charm. Clun Broadwell was a little village just on the border between England and Wales, and I found this charm in the archives at Shrewsbury, which is a local county town around here in Shropshire. And this charm, has a triangle and an arm in it holding a sword, and it's taken quite clearly from Agrippa, and it's also talked about in Barrett's Magus. And this farmer chappie who had it, he lived to 100. He died about 1890 something or other, and his magical book disappeared. Apparently the charm was in there. So what intrigued me about this, because when I came across it, say several years ago, I just recently been reading about it at the time in something that Joseph Peterson had written, where he talks about this charm turning up in Venice, and sometime in the 16th century, somebody had it, and the Inquisition was giving them a hard time. As one would expect them to. But I was intrigued how this material had sort of gone around Europe and ended up on the Welsh border in Victorian times, and this farmer chappie was working with it, and it was still relevant, really. Certainly has a long history in that sense. And one of the things I want to talk to you about also at this period is, could we have another slide number 5? I think it is. We got slide number 5. That's the one. That's it. Go back one, please. And again, keep going. That's it. Fine. That's the one. Now this slide here, It's quite curious. This is a tombstone in a small village of about 300 people, a place called Llanrydder, which is now in North Paris. And it's just down the road from where this chappie I was talking about making this charm that lived to 100. Now, on here, you see it's got Theban, and it doesn't say anything over particular in the sense of what it says is sacred to the. And he goes on to say memory of his wife, Jane. And the chappie writing it was Evan Jones. Well, quite clearly, I think it's a date on there, somewhere 1828. Quite clearly, Evan Jones obviously knew Theban. And where would he have got it from? Probably Barrett's Magus. I mean, because Barrett's Magus came out in 1801. And it was a book in many respects that I rather feel launched a lot of these rural conjurers, because it was chocker with the information that they were going to draw on. Now, this stone is not the only one. There's another one in a village a few miles away, about 20 or 30 years later. But why I want to bring this to your attention is because a few miles away, over the hill in the next valley or two, a place called Glencerrig, well, one must be about 15 years ago. Mary, my late wife, and I, we were in the archives up at Aberystwyth, and we found this charm that this chappie had made, and it was in a blood-soaked stocking. And it was a protective charm, and the wording had all come out of Ebenezer Sibley's illustrated occult science book that came out about, 1790 something. And again, you're thinking to yourself, how does information get up onto this Welsh border here? And I'm thinking to myself, well, this Evan Jones, he's about, 10, 12 miles away. Likely candidate to actually make this charm. And what made me really consider things about this guy is that in the national, at Welshpool, the nearest town over the border here, they got another archive there where there was an account of a conjurer, and I'll read this to you. Where they turn round, and if I can find the damn thing. Oh, there it is. Yes, that's right. I've got it now. It says an account of a conjurer from Llanrydder. This is where the tombstone is. And it survived in the Montgomeryshire collections 1873. And he goes on to say that about 45 years ago, there lived in the parish of Llanrydder a professional medical man who loved to wave a wand and call up spirits from the vasty deep and then put them down again, and act the oracle in divinations. The country people called him Bumbali Caithrol. I think I've said it right. The devil's bum bailiff. Whenever he assumed to practice the black art, he would wear a cap of sheepskin with a high crown, bearing a plume of pigeon's feathers and a coat of an unusual pattern with broad hems and covered with talismanic characters. In his hand he held a whip, the thong of which was made of the skin of an eel and the handle of bone. And with this, he drew a circle around him, outside of which, at a proper distance, he kept those persons who come to him whilst he went through his mystic sentences and performances. Now, here we have a recorded account, which we date to 1828, via the dates that were given, of an individual in this village of 300 people who's doing conjuration. He's got his own kit with his bits and pieces and stuff. I would suggest that it was this character, and it was his wife. I mean, because these rural backwaters, it's not going to be crawling with people who are doing this stuff. I was going to use local terminology then, say it was sniving, but anyway, that's by the by. So here we have, as I say, a recorded character, and so we've got an idea of what he was looking like and what he was doing. Now, if we can move along a bit to the Hereford curse poppets, please. That's it. That's fine. In Hereford Museum, there's 3 of these. One is an individual in a coffin. Another one is somebody's hair tied up with a nail driven in a playing card. And there's this poppet with a plait of hair on the back. There was a write-up that had gone with it where the individual had buried this in the wall of a house, and it was cursing the individual who lived in the home because the person who made it thought they'd been cheated out of money by this individual. I don't know what actually happened, whether it worked or what is another matter, but it turned up about 1987. Somebody found it in a house renovation, which made me think, there must be more of this material around. As I say, if this material is surviving along the Welsh border here, we can quite clearly see there was just quite a substantial lot of occult activity of one hue or another. Well, if it was surviving along here, then it's quite likely it was happening elsewhere in the country, although for some reason there seems to be quite a bit of it survived around these parts. But what I want to look at is a chap called James Morris. Now, he was a conjurer and a blacksmith, and he owned a pub at a place called Cwmbelan, which is just outside Llanidloes in mid Wales. And could we go up to his book? Keep going. That's it. That's the one. He's left this grimoire. Now, found this last October. Leslie and I went up to Aberystwyth University for the day hunting for material. We found this grimoire up there. And can we go on to the next one, please? And anyway, and again, please. That's it. That's fine. Now, calligraphy is rather quite stunning in the book, and it basically is a handwritten copy of some Solomonic material that had come via Fred Hockley, and it has been published. Dr. Stephen Skinner published this material, as did Joseph Peterson, so it is out there. But this was a handwritten text by this blacksmith chappie sometime in the 19th century. I mean, he lived to in 1892, so he's obviously been working with it. And again, as I've said earlier, this material certainly travels around, and I'm rather quite intrigued how it does travel around. So it's obviously a means of communication with other people who are interested in the art. I mean, you think about today with the internet and modern communications with telephones and one thing and another. And yet there was this underground culture where this material was being passed around. And I find it quite fascinating myself in itself. Could we go forward again, please? Again, here's some more of the seals. There's some Jupiter ones here. Again, you see in the bottom right. Right, in the bottom right, we see the Jupiter planetary square with all the numbers on. Again, that's material that you'll find in Agrippa, well, of course, from Barrett. But whoever was really writing this material, and as I say, Fred Hockley used to copy manuscripts of people. Well, he was an accountant in his day job, but quite a lot of his material has survived and has been published, one thing and another. So if we could move on, please. And could we go down, I think it's number 15, where we go down to Charubel. That's Evan Griffith. Now that character was no, that's hang on, we got the wrong labelling on here. This isn't Evan Griffiths of Langurig. That was somebody else. It's my fault. it's got mixed up. Evan Griffiths was another picture we had on here, and he was a neighbour of James Morris, about 5 miles away at the same time. So they obviously knew one another, and they were both conjurers. But this gentleman here is rather quite interesting. This is John Thomas. So I don't want no jokes at the back, please. And he was a Methodist minister, Calvinistic Methodist minister, I think, if I remember right, back in the Victorian times, in Montgomery, which is about 3 or 4 miles away from where I live now. And what happened was he took up an interest in the occult, and basically he left practicing Christianity and went off to create his own occult system. I was at a conference a couple of 3 months ago where somebody referred to him as the Celtic shaman, which made me wince a bit, really, but I wouldn't call him a Celtic shaman at all. But this guy, Charubel, him and his wife obviously fell out with the locals. And I say that because he left an account again in the archives up at Aberystwyth, where he says that having fallen out with the local farmers, his wife cursed the harvest in the hope that their farmers would have bad weather. And I thought, well, yeah, this is not your normal vicar's wife. And some of his letters have survived and are in the archives, and say, at the National Library of Wales. And he moved up to Cheshire, and he wrote this grimoire, and it's been published as Grimoire Sympather. And in this grimoire is all these sigils and accounts of spirits of plants that he's worked with. So it's rather quite it's rather quite something. And he's talking about the magical powers and things, or things like the willow or the oak or the birch, and he gives you all the little sigils of the spirits to use to contact them and endeavour to work with them. So I'm surprised that his work isn't more widely known, and it's quite a gentle book, but it's got a lot to offer. And I'd like to see him more recognised. But he's one of the good guys, really. He published a magazine, and the magazine went all over Europe and all over the place. His occult magazine. It was quite something of his time. Again, it's quite remarkable how this material all travels around the place. So what I was going to talk about is my next thing I want to talk about is Nanny Morgan. Now, Nanny Morgan's rather quite interesting. She was at Much Wenlock, which is in about the middle of Shropshire, really, up on Wenlock Edge, which is made famous by Houseman and some of his poetry. And Nanny was murdered in 1857. She was 60 at the time. And what happened was that she had quite a fearsome reputation for her occult abilities, magical powers, and astrological prowess. And she had quite a wide range of clientele from all sections of society. Now, her lodger, also he said he was a lodger, a young chap, reckoned that she'd put a spell on him and he couldn't leave her. And during an argument, he ends up killing her. Now, what happened was the locals, the people of Much Wenlock, they petitioned the judge that this William Davis, the guy who killed Nanny, that he shouldn't be tried for murder because he couldn't help himself because he was under Nanny's spell and it was witchcraft. And so the judge directed the jury to turn around and say, if they believed that the guy was innocent of murder because it was witchcraft and he was not guilty, and they found him not guilty. And to pacify the locality, the mayor of Much Wenlock had to round up her books, and it said books, and they were talking about books of astrology and amongst one or two other items, pile them up in a public place and burn them. Now, this is 1857, and this old girl had held the locals in such fear that this is what they had to. This is the time when steam trains are coming around here. You know, we're entering what we deem as a modern world. And yet here in rural Shropshire, the belief in such potencies was real enough in people's lives. Again, that's something I found rather quite fascinating. And that's at the trial, where it was all reported in newspapers, and neighbours came forward to tell the court what she was like. We have various accounts where it says Anne Edwards said to the court, "I've known the deceased ever since I was a child, and she was a strong and powerful woman, had the reputation of being a fortune teller, but people in the neighbourhood were afraid of her, and she was supposed to be a person of great power, and she possessed the power known as the evil eye, and she was consulted upon the loss of goods, ailments of cattle, and that she cast nativities to tell fortunes." So here we have somebody who's actually an astrologer, and who's working with astrological techniques, which quite clearly with astrology can be traced all the way back down to Babylonia. So here's, I say, here's this old girl in rural Shropshire, mid-19th century, working hardcore astrology, apart from the fact she was scaring the shit out of everybody with what she was doing. But he goes on to say, where somebody else turns around and say that she had a very bad character in the neighbourhood and was known to be a witch, and that she could tell fortunes and influence the fate of people, and if anything adverse happened, she was always suspected of it, and that she could bring people out of the field to her. How he goes on to say. So, as I say, here is this individual who basically dominated the locality, and people were in fear of her. So, obviously, you hadn't heard of Gerald Gardner's law of threefold return. I don't think it reached Shropshire at that point. But one of the other characters I wanted to talk to you about was John Harry's court on Cadno down at Landovery, which is just out of the border of Powys, really. It's in North Carmarthenshire. But I bring this individual to your attention because a lot of people in mid Wales and along the border used to find their way down there to seek his help. Court o' Cadno, I understand it means the court of the fox, somebody said to me once. Now, this chappie, he'd trained as a Harley Street surgeon, and what happened was he'd set himself up in practice as a conjurer, an astrologer. He talks about how the sick and the sorrowful all beat a path to his door for his aid. And once upon a time, at one point, there was somebody who got murdered, and he put a horoscope together and worked out who he claimed had done it. And the court thought he had something to do with it, and they were going to have him charged with being an accessory. And he said, no, he said, it's the power of astrology. And he goes on to say, if you give me your date of birth and your time of birth, I'll tell you the hour of your death. Of course, they backed off. But what happened in the end with this guy was that he'd worked out on this particular day his life was going to be in danger and he's likely to die from a fall from a high place. And he thought, well, I'll get over that and stay in bed all day. Well, in the evening, there was a fire broke out in the roof from the chimney, and so he goes up on the roof to put it out, and he falls, breaks his neck. So he was right. maybe some things you don't want to be too right on. And some of the other people that we've had round these parts, of course, is Gideon Plank. Now, Gideon Plank was a witch hunter. He'd spent some time with Matthew Hopkins in East Anglia, and he came to South Shropshire at some point, trying to stir up the same sort of thing. But the locals ganged up on him and they tied him to a tree and killed him. So the story goes. But there was a nursery rhyme, a Shropshire nursery rhyme that says, when the pricking time did tell, the finder came from fiery hell to rid this earth of monstrous beasts and lay them down for the devil's feasts. And now a goal he wanders still to find the child that bears him ill. But Gideon Plank will find you out, for he is coming, have no doubt. You know, stuff like that must have scared the hell out of kids. We didn't tell them something like that at bedtime. But things like this Gideon Plank character, forgotten about now, but you know, he'd sort of slipped into local folklore to the extent where they were telling rhymes about him, in the sense that, well, scary rhymes, I suppose, in some sense. So his power had hadn't quite waned. It was still there in the ether, as it were. So one thing about this part of the world is how it's pulled people in of an occult nature. I mean, at one point we had Mary Herbert, the Countess of Pembrokeshire. She was holed up at Ludlow Castle with Walter Raleigh's brother, where they were studying alchemy and running a little group and being guided by John Dee and Sir Edward Kelly, amongst others. And then of course, Anna Kingsford, who's in many respects can be seen, I rather feel, as the mother of the Golden Dawn, is buried not far from Shrewsbury, where her husband had been vicar, and she'd gone off to Paris to study medicine. And I won't go too much into it because Elaine Bailey's going to be talking about Anna Kingsford at the conference, so I don't want to steal her thunder on that one. And she's far more knowledgeable about Anna Kingsford than myself. But it was quite a little, how can I say, magical collective in some sense in Shropshire in the 19th century, where we'd have Reverend Ayton was one of the first people of the Golden Dawn. He was vicaring up here at one point, and of course Walter Mosley, who Fred Hockley said was in bad odor because he used sex and drugs in his magic. Although Walter Mosley, before Crowley, Walter Mosley, when he died, so David Rankin told me once, they said they spent, there was a 2-day auction breaking up his occult library. So God knows what he had in there. And of course, Fred Hockley used to come and stay up here quite a lot. He's another interesting character, and he used to hang out with the Harleys over at Brampton Bryan, which is just over the border in Herefordshire, which is where you get Harley Street. Some of these old Norman families never really left the area. They're still around here. And there's an interesting story where they were using a showstone, and it had been in the Harley family for, well, hundreds of years, I believe. That is one story that I've come across. But one of the more interesting features of the locality is the cursing wells. Now, often you think of wells, you know, holy wells, healing wells, but in this part of the world, they'll actually have cursing wells. And Ronald Hutton talks about one, I think it's Stations of the Sun, or it might be Mary England. I can't remember which book it is now, but it's one of those. And he talks about how a farmer from Trefegloes in mid Wales, just up the road here, hadn't left his farm for over 20 years because his neighbour used to go to one of these cursing wells, come back with a barrel of water and sprinkle it around the boundary of his farm. And he stayed on there as a prisoner until the character died. That is how strong belief was in occult property of things. And then, of course, there's other stories where other farmers had, one farmer from Brecon had gone all the way up to his famous cursing well up in Clwyd, just outside of the area we're talking about. And he came back with 2 big barrels to deal with his neighbours. So, this idea of, as I say, healing wells and holy wells, around here, these parts, you get, as I say, cursing wells. And one of the tricks would have been to write someone's name on a piece of slate, read some biblical verses over it, and throw it in the well. But again, see, that, if you look at it, is a continuation of Romano-British Celtic practice, because if you go down to Bath, down with the Roman Baths, and I'm sure some of you have done, if not all of you, then there's a fine display, or they did last time I was there, of lead curse tablets they'd fished out of the water with people's names on it and written on there and been cursed. So in some sense, this was a continuation. We can see this. And the idea of using water as a medium to reenact the curse, I think is rather quite interesting. So what I want to move on to is the practice of sin eating. Could we go up a bit, find the monument, please? That's the one. That's the one. Now this, thank you. This is the monument of a chap called Munslow. He was a local farmer. In fact, he still has family in the locality. And his claim to fame was that he was a sin eater. You'll see sin eating in Mary Webb's novel, Precious Bane. Now, this is a little village, well, not a village, hamlet really, church and about farm and a couple of houses, called Rattling Hope. Locals call it Ratchet. It's just on the slopes of the Longmynd, so it's sort of like facing into Wales, and it's a long-standing local custom, this idea of sin eating. And Phil Rickman writes a little bit about it in one of his occult novels. I think it's Fabric of Sin, the one he sets down at Garway, the Knights Templar Church at the bottom end of Hereford. There's some accounts of sin eating in there. But this chappie, he bucked the trend a bit, really, in some sense, that whereas the sin eater was always deemed to be a person of no worth, a poor person on the margins of society, this guy was a local farmer and employed 5 people. So in that sense, he would have been quite wealthy for somebody within the locality. And what happened was that on the coffin, they placed some bread and some salt and generally a coin and something to drink, like some beer. And by taking the coin and eating the bread and the salt and drinking the beer, he was taking on the sin of the departed, so they wouldn't spend too much time in purgatory. And what happened was, the words that went with his action was, "I give easement and rest now to thee, dear man. Come not down the lanes or in our meadows, and for thy peace I pawn my own soul." So this Richard Munslow, as I say, was quite a well-to-do character by the local standards, and he wasn't the usual sort of person who one would deem to take on these roles. So he died 1904, so just outside living memory, really. So these practices along the Welsh border really hadn't gone away. And as I say, still has family in the locality, to my knowledge. And we've done that. Right. What I'm going to do is move on a little bit to something that's a little bit different, perhaps, but still within the remit. And I want to talk about Monica English. Now, Monica English is rather an interesting character. She turns up in the Lowest Born book. And Monica English had joined Gerald Gardner's Coven over Bricket Wood. And I know this is not up on the Welsh border, but it is relevant to what I'm going to tell you. And she ends up going off into West Norfolk, Swaffham Way, where she's involved with the Coven over there. Now, she started off here, a couple of miles from where I live, and she was bigotiously married to the master of the local foxhounds. This is 1950, and she goes off on this theme where she's starting this coven over in West Norfolk. Now, there are various groups who claim to have a lineage that goes back to a coven in the 1950s in the locality around here. There couldn't have been that many, so I rather suspect that it must have come from her. And a lot of these things are rather, can't really be proved one way or the other as such, but and a lot of it becomes word of mouth. But you might say no smoke without fire, but it is rather quite an interesting theme, because out of all this becomes the Regency people who moved up to Shropshire and sort of cut themselves off a bit, really. But they're buried in the locality here. As time caught up with them in the end. So it actually has been a hotbed of occult activity, and in many respects it still is. We have the Welsh Occult Conference, which is coming up in May, and I'm running the Occult Sunday School. I think we're doing Barrett's Majors shortly. So in that sense, we are carrying on the occult traditions of the locality, which I think is rather a good thing. So whilst I could waffle, I'm going to leave it there. And someone says about book collection. Yeah, it's an occult book collection I've been building since I was 15. So there's a lot of old favourites in there that you'll all know. There's a lot of old rare books too that you probably won't know. So there's a lot of material there, one here and another. And the weird thing is, I pretty much read most of it. So what I'll do, I'll take any questions and I'll do my best to answer them.
Right. Yes, I had myself muted there because there was a bit of an echo. I don't know whether the echo's still there. Apologies if it is. I'm going to go back and mute myself in a sec. So, yes, hopefully, if there are any questions, I shall endeavour to... Indeed. Right, let's put this little comment up. And it was only a small part of it too, yeah. Oh, no echo. Lovely, thank you. Well, hey, I fixed it. Okay. All right, so is there any questions? So that was a fabulous talk. Thank you so much. Really interesting. Yeah, I'm excited, and we've got the book on order, so that's good. And my husband has got a wish list of all your books, so there you go.
Oh well, don't put him off. Don't put him off.
So yeah, so you can go. I've put the link to the book. Have I done it? I don't know whether I did it. I tried to. No, I haven't done it yet. Hang on. Paste. This could be the link to the book. Let's see. No, that's a different thing. That was the other link. Okay, carry on. Oh yes, here's a question. Good. Got to run. There we go. Got to run, but a great talk. Thank you, Gary, from Paranormal UK Network. And there we go. How do you think Manzler? I take it can you see this? Remove the sins of others.
Yeah. The sins of others. Well, basically, the idea is, as I understand it, by saying the words we read out, taking the food and the drink and the money, the idea was that he would be consuming their sin and they were paying him to do it. So the thinking therefore becomes really, I suppose, that the individual's karma becomes part of his. Although I don't think they would have used the word karma, but from himself, how did he take it from himself? I just went with him, I presume. You know, I'm not too sure about that one.
Oh, we got feedback again.
Unless he was like a fox that's got fleas that takes a bit of sheep's wool in its mouth and goes into the river, and then all the fleas creep up the top onto the wall, and he lets go of it all, and he float off. I'm not sure about that one. Well, I'd expect Avalonia to be, so I'm pleased about that. Of course, Avalonia is my favorite publisher, so I'm biased too.
Yes, and mine.
Okay.
I will keep muting and unmuting myself because apparently there's feedback and we haven't fixed it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I know there's lemon in the water. It's just plain water. It's not got gin in it.
Okay, we got any more questions before we go? Oh, yes. Hang on. One from...
Oh, Stuart, hello. Not yet. Not yet. Is there any online access James Morris's grimoire? No, but we do have a copy because we went up to the archives and Leslie's transcribing it quietly. So with the idea that time we got things sorted with the Aberystwyth University people, it could actually be published. Although material as such, one could say, is in the public domain by and large, is still, I think, an historical document, whereas this character in the locality was working with it and quite clearly had some superior knowledge about the magical art, because it's quite detailed, and it's worth publishing, I think. So we should see what happens as soon as it gets finished. Sure, I think we're about halfway through it, I think. Something like that. It's going to be a little while yet. Hello. Thank you.
Unmute myself again. Any more questions? Anybody got any more questions before we pop off? Right, I think that might be it. Thank you so much for that fantastic talk. Oh, am I arriving late? Yes, I'm afraid you are, Sarah.
Oh dear.
Sarah says, am I arriving late?
We'll start again if you like.
Yes. Yes, sorry. Okay. Typical. Yes, sorry, Sarah.
Apologise.
Stuart says, there you go.
Yes, Stuart. Hello, Stuart.
Alex Sumner says, see you in May.
Certainly hope so.
Yes. Hi, Alex.
Yes. Be good. Have a conversation with you about one or two things. Maybe next time.
And then we have, good to see Granddad can still do a good talk.
Yeah.
How sweet.
My daughter's just had a baby.
Oh, that's lovely. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, I really enjoyed this from the USA. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Constance. Nice smiley face from Alex. Hi. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, this has just been fabulous. I've just had such a lovely time. I hope you have.
It's been good.
And I hope you'd like to join me again soon for another chat. That would be lovely.
Well,
at some
there's lots
stage.
to talk about. We could talk about all manner of things.
Oh yes, that would be fabulous. I would thoroughly enjoy that. I really love all this stuff. Just in my element. I'm a doer rather than a. I'm not like Paul. I'm not as big a bookworm. I have to put stuff in my ears, so I have to have Kindle versions of everything. I'm not a reader as well. I am, but not.
Each their own.
Yeah, so I listen to books rather than read them.
Fair enough.
But doing this stuff is amazing because then you get sort of, one-on-one is much more better,
How long have you been doing this?
Well, about 20 odd years I've been doing occulty stuff. So yeah.
No, I mean this program.
Oh, just this. Oh, well, we started doing the monthly mystical about 3 years ago. We didn't do it monthly. It was a bit like what's happening again now. It's like weekly, and then it's kind of burnt out, and we kind of, there was other things going on and operations and stuff, so it all went. But yeah, so we're back on form again now. So monthly-ish mysticals. It's set for a comeback.
That's a good thing. So I should.
Yes.
Tuning in now. I know that you exist.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Yes. So this is the first time this year is the first time we've done it live on YouTube. Before I was doing like little chats on Zoom, and then we would record them and put them onto YouTube. And then I thought, oh, why don't we just do it live, and then people can chat and stuff. So yeah, so that's how that came about. So yes, thank you so much. And I look forward to, unfortunately, as I've already said to you before, I can't make the conference. I will put a link everywhere. I've shared it with everybody, all over the place. So yes,
just to the mill.
I've shared it, and I will definitely come to some of your. You've got some other stuff going on as well, haven't you? So I'm definitely going to try and make it to something that's going on up your end.
See how it all goes. All right. Anyway, speak to you again then.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you, Gary. All right, speak to you soon. Bye for now. Well, that was fantastic. I hope you enjoyed that, everybody that's there. And listen, I would love to say that please don't forget, like and subscribe to my channel, because the more you help me, the more I can help you and get lots more people on, so that everybody can see some of these amazing people. And there's just mind-blowing amounts of people out there that we need to get shown, into the public eye. And the more of us there is, the better, no? So please like and subscribe to the channel. And I will go back up to the comments in case I've missed any. La 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 la. I don't know which ones I've missed, so I'm just going to get that there. Great, thank you so much. Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, I'll leave it there. Hope you have a fabulous evening, and I'll see you soon on the monthly mystical. Please like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff, and I hope to see you all soon. Love and light. All right, see you later. Bye for now.